Lowering cholesterol with diet. Okay, so that's wonderful. So Aditi is kind enough to put this together. Aditi, take it away.
Yes, so today the theme for our session is that we'll be talking about lowering cholesterol with diet. So in terms of what we'll do today, we'll go over the two recipe demonstrations. It's a combination of pictures and videos, so I'm not going to switch and play a whole video, but the instructions will be up on the slides the entire time. Then we'll talk about what high cholesterol is and why it's a concern, and then talk about reducing cholesterol with diet. And then at the end, there's a few other recipe suggestions to try, and we can send you the full recipes after the session. So starting off with the recipe demonstration. So we're going to start off with the chickpea lentil soup. This is inspired by some of the ingredients that are required in your diet when you're looking to reduce cholesterol, which we'll be talking about later. But most notably, the fact that we're using beans and lentils in this recipe, both of which are rich in fiber, which is known to kind of help reduce your cholesterol levels. So if anyone is cooking along today, the first thing you're going to want to do is heat up a pan with a little bit of olive oil. And once the pan is hot, just add some diced onion and garlic and saute that for 1 to 2 minutes.
So Aditi, if you didn't want to use olive oil, want to avoid olive oil, you just use some water or some broths or something in its place?
Yeah, if you wanted to avoid oil, you could just use a little bit of like veggie stock or broth in its place. In terms of this recipe, I think I used like 1 teaspoon of olive oil to make like the entire batch of soup. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a ton, but if you wanted to avoid oils, you could definitely just substitute with broth.
I actually made it today, but I didn't fry the onions or the garlic. I just made it into one, how do you call it, like one pot, a dish. Like I put everything together and I cooked it that way because some dishes come like that. I guess it's okay too.
Yeah, for sure. It's totally up to you. For this recipe, the reason why we just brown off the onion, the garlic, and then the spices is just in terms of flavor. You can still get the same flavor without doing that. It's just kind of like a cooking technique to brown it off and bloom the spices, but absolutely not required if you're looking to kind of one pot it and don't want to be using any oil.
I was lazy.
So I like that idea about putting it all in one pot. So I just got one pot myself. I'm going to put that on there. We got a brand new stove. I don't even know how to use it yet, so my wife had to come turn it on. You know, if you you want to get that the pot hot first, right? So if you don't get that your dish hot, what happens, Didi? If you just throw everything in while it's cold, what will happen?
Well, it kind of depends. If you're throwing things into cold oil, they'll just kind of soak up the oil, which is not what you'd want. If you're throwing stuff in and the pan is cold, in terms of kind of browning or blooming the spices, you wouldn't get that either. Like in the grand scheme of things, it probably won't make a ton of difference, but if you're looking for kind of little elements of flavor and you want to cook things properly, the pan does need to be hot.
Yeah. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just heating up my pot because I want that chef appeal there. So so what I do is I just put a little bit of water in its place, and so I'm going to take the onions. I'm going to throw that in, and the garlic, and I love garlic. I don't know about, does everybody else like garlic too as well?
Oh yeah, here too.
Yeah, garlic is wonderful.
It's the best, yeah. The reason why I actually use it as one pot dish because there was no mention of oil, so I assumed there is no oil. That's why I put everything into one pot.
Yeah, so you can either make it, you can substitute with water, chicken broth. You can put a touch of olive oil or whatever you'd like to. I just put a little bit of water into this one over here. I'm going to try to go oil-free right now. I think of oil being a processed food, and so I'm trying to. I'm trying to limit my my calories intake. Anybody else thoughts about that? So again, so 1 tablespoon of olive oil. How many calories does that have?
I think 1 tablespoon is like 90 calories.
Yeah, I think it's around
But I can
110
Google it.
calories or something like that. So I think a tablespoon is about 110 calories, or if I remember correctly. And remember, how do we convert from tablespoon to teaspoon, everybody? Does anybody know?
I think it's 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon.
That's three. Okay, three teaspoons to 1 tablespoon. Gotcha. So right now I'm sauteing my onions and garlic. It smells delicious. And I'm gonna try to limit to 1 pot too as well. I like that idea, Ivanka, and we'll go forward about that. That's great.
Yeah.
And
I also only used 1 pot because I did it in the Instant Pot. So it's kind of an easy way to limit the amount of dishes you're using.
You don't have to use any oil.
Mhm.
yeah, you don't have to. You can if you want to. It's sort of personal preference there. What's the advantage of an Instant Pot or a crock pot? This is just on the stove.
The main difference is when you have to bring everything to a simmer. If it's on the stove, you have to be there to monitor it, or at least be nearby to monitor it, just to make sure it doesn't boil over or anything like that. With an Instant Pot or a crock pot, you kind of put the settings on and just kind of leave it and come back. For me, it's convenient because I can set it, then go do all of my work and come back and the meal is kind of done. It's also what we do at home. My parents will usually set it in the morning, then they have their work day, and then by the time lunch is there, they can go back and check and everything is done. If you want to be kind of monitoring it over the stove, that's something you can do. I guess the one advantage of doing it over the stove is if you want to reduce it and kind of make it a lot thicker, that's something you can do in the stove by controlling the heat. You don't really have that option with a crock pot or an Instant Pot. Once you close it, you're kind of done and you wait until it's done to open it.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's been simmering for a couple minutes there. What's next?
Yeah, so next you're just gonna add the spices. So for this one, it's ground ginger, cinnamon, turmeric, and a little bit of salt, but you can add whatever you would like. And if you add it into the onion and garlic and saute it, it blooms the spices, but you don't have to do that step. You could just add it in with the water and the tomato puree. And once that's sauteed, you just add the tomato puree and mix everything together.
How much turmeric would you put in there again?
I think you should put like around a teaspoon is what I ended up putting. If you don't like the flavor of turmeric, you could put less, but it's a nice anti-inflammatory ingredient to add. So definitely add more if you like the flavor.
Some people feel that you can get antioxidants from food as well. And so I love turmeric. And so you put the turmeric, the tomato paste. Where is that tomato paste here? And how much pureed tomato do you put in again?
So it depends on the amount you're making. The recipe instructions I gave, I think, calls for half a cup.
Okay.
If you're making like half of that, you'd put 1/4 of a cup.
I used actually concentrated tomato paste.
Mm-hmm.
I guess
Yeah.
you used that too, right?
Could you put
Yeah.
just tomatoes in there if you wanted to?
Yeah, definitely. You could put just, cut up or chopped up tomatoes in there. Or if you didn't want to like chop up the tomatoes, if you had like diced tomatoes, for example, I think they sell diced tomatoes in the can, you could also use that as well. And just kind of whatever you have lying around.
Okay. So you said you put some turmeric, some tomatoes, and what else was the other thing you put in there?
I put some cinnamon and ground ginger. And then a little bit of salt for taste.
Okay. I think this is ginger here. Here we go. Ginger. Ginger is great. Now, what's in ginger there? Is ginger also rich in antioxidants?
Ginger itself is considered to be very like anti-inflammatory, along with most fruits and vegetables and aromatics. But ginger itself, a lot of people talk about the fact that it has digestive benefits and properties, and in general tends to be like a really nice anti-inflammatory ingredient to add.
Okay, so I put some ginger in, I put some turmeric in, I put some tomato puree. Anything else we should be putting in at this stage? And we just keep making it, just smells beautiful.
Yeah, so you would add that in, mix for a minute, and then once that's done, you just add the chickpeas and the lentils.
Yeah.
The chickpeas have to be cooked when you add them, so either from the can or pre-cooked. If you were looking to cook it with everything else, you'd be pressure cooking for a really long time.
So I got some chickpeas. I got the low sodium version, but I'm going to rinse it out so I get rid of some of the salt there. And now, could you put other, besides chickpeas, could you put in, let's say, I don't know, soybeans?
Yeah, for sure. If you you can switch out the type of lentil, the type of chickpea, add whatever you would like. This recipe is based on like a Moroccan dish where traditionally they would use chickpeas and lentils. But if you wanted to make your own version with not chickpeas and not lentils, you could definitely do that.
Chickpeas in. So again, is that it's always better to make your own, but we got the can right now. And then we just put the lentils into as well.
Yeah, so put the chickpeas and the lentils in. You can put as much as you would like, but it should be equal parts.
Now, the lentils, you just put them in without being cooked. You just put them in. Is that right? They'll cook themselves.
Yeah, so you just want to rinse them and then you can put them in.
Right. And rinsing, why do you want to rinse them?
Just to get like the little starch and like the substances that are kind of coating the lentils off. Sometimes there might be like a little bit of dirt and stuff on there as well. So usually you want to rinse it until the water is pretty clear.
So you can get some of the digestible starches out of there, or undigestible starches, and I'm going to put some extra. I'm putting extra beans. I'm going to put some soybeans. I kind of like beans and soybeans. I guess put a little extra there, just to add a little bit more. And because I added some extra, I'm going to put a little bit more tomato. Hey, that's perfect. So Ivanka, you cooked yours already this morning?
I cooked it today already, yes.
Great. Anybody else cooking or cooked any of this stuff at all? Or everybody's just watching? I'm cooking away here.
Yeah, it's the whole house smells really good, very cinnamony.
Yeah. Does that smell beautiful?
I wanted to ask about cinnamon. There are two types of cinnamon. My mom always says the cinnamon we using, the regular one, is not so good for us. So
What do you mean about the cinnamon?
there is, I think there is a Ceylon cinnamon, which is supposed to be really, really good, but it's harder to get. And there's this regular cinnamon, which you can buy pretty much everywhere. I think it's called cassia, something like that. I think that's what regular stores are using, but they're not as healthy as the Ceylon cinnamon.
I don't know too much about that. Anybody know much about that at all?
I don't know much about that either, but I can look it up and see what I find.
No, okay, all right. So we don't have cinnamon. What can we put in its place?
You could put whatever you wanted. You could put cloves, you could put nutmeg, you could just omit it altogether.
Allspice?
Yeah, you could put allspice. I think I actually ended up using pumpkin pie spice because I didn't have cinnamon on its own, so that also works.
You know what I have? I have a few pumpkin seeds. I can go put a few pumpkin seeds thrown in there for good luck. One of the things I started to do lately is add pumpkin seeds to things. It gives a little, like these are the nice, these are just unsalted pumpkin seeds. They give it a little crunchiness. It's a little bit of green. I'm gonna put a little bit of some parsley in there too as well, just because it makes it look beautiful.
Mm-hmm. To answer the cinnamon question, so yes, there's the two types, the Ceylon and the cassia. Mm-hmm. Both of them do have benefits. So they block the tau protein that's implicated in Alzheimer's. Whether or not it's linked to preventing cognitive decline has not been tested. Both of them also have compounds that are good at promoting insulin sensitivity. So in studies with type 2 diabetics, it shows that consuming cinnamon can be helpful. So the cassia cinnamon does contain a particular compound that could be toxic called coumarin. However, you have to consume a lot of cinnamon for it to be toxic. So if you're eating like a ton of cinnamon on a daily basis and it's the cassia cinnamon, that could be harmful. However, if you're putting like half a teaspoon in your oats or half a teaspoon here, they're not likely to be harmful.
Okay, thank you.
So it's interesting. We did a recent webinar about a week or so ago. We talked about multivitamins and minerals and micronutrients, and everybody take a look at that. So basically, is that one of the things is we try to give all these supplements and they don't work, but Mother Nature's symphony of food with all these different areas. For instance, beta carotene increases your chance of dying from lung cancer if you're a smoker by 15 to 25%. Beta carotenoids is 300 molecules in carrots and red pepper and orange peppers, and are felt to be cardioprotective. So very hard to read the dietary literature and know for sure where you're standing, but I'm going to take my cues from Mother Nature and try to put all non-processed food as much as I can together and combine them in there. And I encourage you to take a look at that video. Dee did a wonderful job of some of the micros from potassium to magnesium to iodine to B12 to iron. So take a look at that video when you get a chance, everybody.
Yes, so that was delicious. Yeah, that was our webinar this past Friday. So it should be the latest video that's on YouTube if you want to check it out. It's a bit of a longer webinar, so you might need to break it up across multiple nights. I think that was definitely one of the longer ones.
All right, my dish smells beautiful. Has what we have to do next now?
Yeah, so next you have to add water. So whatever amount of chickpeas and lentils you put in, you want to double the amount of water you're adding to help the lentils cook. And then you either will simmer for around 20 to 30 minutes, or you can pressure cook on high for 2 minutes.
Beautiful. Now, when you simmer, what type of temperature should you simmer at?
So usually like medium, like you don't want it to be like a roaring boil, but like a light bubbling almost. So typically medium, low, that's where you'd want it to be at.
So we're making a beautiful soup. Now I'm noticing I need some more green in my soup, so I'm going to put some more parsley in. I like a little color there. Need some color in there. So you say the rainbow of colors.
Yeah, you can add parsley is really good to add other herbs as well, or you could even add spinach, kale, whatever you want.
Yeah.
Coriander.
Yes. Yeah, I gotta find where we put the kale. One of the things I love this sweet kale salad, so I'm going to put a little bit of that thrown in there as well. There, and add some color. I saw somebody the other day put purple cabbage into theirs, and that was really made that color so beautiful. So you want to make it look beautiful as well, right? And the more color, the more antioxidants, and if you like spice, you can add things like cayenne pepper and stuff if you want to transform that. Those are actually quite rich in data to decrease inflammation. So there you go. So I got that simmer. Now, do you put a top or no top on your food there?
I put a top on myself.
What's
Yeah,
that?
if you can put a lid on if you would like.
What does putting a lid do to it?
Well, it kind of like traps everything inside. So if you're looking to kind of leave it for an extended period of time, it would kind of trap like the heat and the contents inside. If you're looking for things to like thicken and evaporate, you don't want the lid on. So that's kind of the difference.
Alrighty.
Okay.
That looks beautiful.
Yeah, so now that whoever's cooking along hopefully has their soup simmering, we can move on to the next recipe. Since it is Super Bowl and a common snack tends to be chips and dip, I thought I would do like a healthier version of a dip. So this is a spinach and tofu dip. If you don't like tofu, you could replace the tofu with either like a plant-based yogurt, or you could go with Greek yogurt. Those are also good options. So yeah, you're just gonna start by sauteing the onion, garlic, and frozen spinach in a little bit of olive oil, or if you don't want to use olive oil, you could use broth or water for a couple of minutes, just until everything kind of softens and comes together.
So onions, garlic, frozen spinach. Okay.
It could also be fresh spinach. It's just you might not find the best quality fresh spinach available at the store, so frozen spinach is a very good substitute.
Why would you say not a good quality?
It just depends. So I find for me, when I tend to buy like fresh spinach, if it's not stored properly, it tends to go bad really quickly. So I just kind of stick to the frozen spinach because despite being frozen, it tastes quite good when you kind of defrost it.
Yeah.
So how do you save spinach well so it doesn't go bad? What part of the fridge do you keep it in?
That is a good question. I can check.
So I know there's two compartments, one's more dry and one's more wet. And does everybody know very much about that? How to keep foods from spoiling in the fridge?
Okay, so a couple of sites on the internet say that you should keep the spinach in a big container with a lid and keep paper towels with it to absorb any moisture that they might leak out over the days. And that should keep it good for 5 to 7 days.
I'm just chopping up some more onions here.
Press the on off button. And that's the
Okay, so once the onion, garlic, and spinach is sauteed, essentially you're going to be blending the silken tofu in a blender until it's creamy, or if you're using yogurt, you would just take out the amount of yogurt you want. And then it's just a matter of putting everything together and mixing it.
I just love onions.
Okay, so just keeping an eye on the time, we do have a lot of like content slides as well. So since I don't want this to go too long, I'm gonna move on from the recipes, but if anyone's following along and needs the instructions, just let me know and I'll flip back. Okay, and this is just some of the nutritional information if anyone was interested. So for the soup, it would be, so for the amount that I gave the recipe for, it should be around 4 servings of half a cup, maybe a little bit less or more depending on the ratios that you used. But yeah, there's a decent amount of protein in there, decent amount of fiber as well, and it's definitely lowering the fat and then lowering the sodium if you're kind of emitting salt. But obviously, if you're adding salt, it's going to be a little bit higher. And then for the spinach dip, same situation. You do get like a little bit of protein if you're using like the 1/4 cup serving, and it definitely is a lot less fat than if you were to buy a conventional spinach dip.
Could I ask you a question about the Instant Pot recipe?
For sure.
At the end of the 2 minutes cooking, do you quick release or let it slowly release?
So I personally like to let it slowly release. So I just leave it on keep warm for around like 20 plus minutes. And then it's usually good to, if you turn to venting, there's nothing that gets released.
Okay.
If you would like to open it sooner, you can quickly release, but usually I prefer to just leave it on keep warm.
Just let it sit. Okay, thank you.
How much tofu do we put in again for the dip?
Half a block.
Half a block, okay.
Okay, I'm going to get started on the discussion on what is high cholesterol and why it's a concern. And again, if anyone needs me to go back to the recipe, just let me know. So starting off with high cholesterol, oftentimes when you have a high cholesterol level in your blood, you'll get diagnosed or told that you have something called hypercholesterolemia. This just means elevated levels of cholesterol in the blood. So in terms of what these values look like and when you should initiate therapy, this is a diagram from the Canadian Journal of Cardiology. So they essentially say that you can initiate treatment if the LDL cholesterol is greater than or equal to 3.5 millimoles per liter. If you're really high risk, even if the LDL is not quite that high, you should be initiating therapy. And in terms of the primary target, you typically want it to be less than 2. So those are just some things to work towards, even though your cholesterol might not be super elevated to the point where you necessarily require therapy. There's always scope to try and get it lower. The lower your LDL cholesterol, the less your risk is for atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease in the future.
So I have this rule called 3-1-1. You want your cholesterol less than 3, triglycerides less than 1, LDL less than 1, HDL, the healthy greater than 1. Those are so-called the ideal values, and we can decide with you what the best targets are in that circumstance. So, but and we can do that against individuals. So someone who's had a heart attack or more than one heart attack, has diabetes, has a very positive family history, has a high Lp(a), diabetes, renal insufficiency. You want to be more aggressive in the cholesterol management.
For sure. So when we talk about modifiable factors, especially modifiable factors related to high cholesterol, these are factors that we can control and modify in order to achieve change. So there is a component of cholesterol that could be genetic. We can't change genetics. We can't change our age. We can, however, change things like diet and exercise, which are 2 of the very important modifiable factors when we're talking about high cholesterol. And today we're going to be talking about diet specifically. So making dietary changes can definitely help reduce cholesterol levels, and it usually involves involves a combination of eating more things like beans, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, certain types of fatty fish, berries, and plant proteins. So these are some food groups that you'll see will crop up in the upcoming slides. So why exactly is high cholesterol a concern? So high cholesterol itself doesn't necessarily present with any symptoms, but what we're concerned about is how it contributes to risk of heart disease over time. So if we take a look at the image on the right, we can see that in a normal artery that doesn't have any plaque, there is normal laminar blood flow. When we look at the artery that has plaque buildup, and cholesterol plays a big role in plaque buildup, it gets narrowed through atherosclerosis, and as a result, blood flow can be occluded, and it doesn't flow through unobstructed. So high plasma cholesterol increases the risk for atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, or ASCVD, through plaque formation. And plaque most commonly forms in the coronary arteries of the heart. So these are the arteries that supply the heart muscle with blood. And plaque buildup here can block blood flow to the heart, which can be implicated in causing a myocardial infarction or causing ischemia. So how exactly does this atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease occur? So this is at the blood vessel level. So we're looking at the endothelium, which is the lining of the blood vessel, and then the layers underneath. So we have we have low density cholesterol, lipoprotein cholesterol, so LDL-C, which is highlighted by the little yellow rings with the little circles on them. So that's floating around in the blood. And over time, you get something called endothelial dysfunction. This is usually caused by diabetes, high blood pressure, being sedentary and not being very physically active, or smoking. And as a result, you get the migration of these LDL cholesterol from the endothelial layer into the tunica intima. When it reaches here, it signals the release of reactive oxygen species, which results in the oxidation of LDL. This will recruit certain immune cells to the site of the endothelium. Oftentimes, these immune cells are monocytes. When they come in, they will consume or phagocytose or endocytose the oxidized LDL, causing the formation of foam cells. And essentially, this results in a big process that causes the formation of plaque. Eventually, the plaque tends to occlude the blood flow. There's breakage, you get a thrombus, and essentially you can get this process that kind of completely occludes the blood flow within that vessel, and that's what's implicated in causing that blockage of blood flow, and that can be implicated in a heart attack. So you can see, even though you have circulating LDL cholesterol in your blood, how over time different things can occur, and it results to this process that gets slowly accelerated over time into plaque formation, and that then increases your risk of cardiovascular disease in the future.
Which is true. If you just backtrack one slide, if you just go back one slide there, you can see that on the top is your blood vessel, the red cells, and that endothelium is one layer thick. And that's basically that endothelial layer has to be healthy, because once it gets unhealthy, you can see the plaque starts to form in that yellow cheesy material that goes right into the vessel wall. And so triglyceride-rich particles, LDL particles, blood pressure, smoking, blood sugar. You can see high blood pressure, how they can all damage that single layer called endothelium. And so it's a fragile layer. Well, actually, it's not that fragile, but it gets damaged. And so protect it. And so we mentioned some of the diet, which you're having over here, and maybe the anti-inflammatory components of some of the foods too as well can be protective. And of course, medication if need be to keep your blood pressure down and keep your cholesterol down. I think everybody should, have their own blood pressure machine, make sure ideal blood pressure between 110 to 130. We can decide whether or not you want to have an average cholesterol of about 5 in a 50-year-old, unfortunately leads to heart disease and stroke. So I want that well below normal. That's why that 3-1-1 rule, cholesterol 3, LDL less than 1, triglyceride less than 1, HDL healthy greater than 1, or some of the targets over here. So those are, extreme targets. So I got this concoction of the tofu and all the vegetables. Now, did I just pour that into the onions and everything like that and let that simmer there, Aditi?
No, you don't cook it. So you just take the spinach and the onion and the garlic that you have sauteed, and you just put it with the tofu and just mix it together.
Okay. I almost cooked something I shouldn't have. There you go. And actually, the more raw food that you eat, the better the antioxidants are for most things. Certain things you actually increase the value. So tomato, for instance, when you cook it, you actually release some extra protective effects, but most fruits and vegetables are best eat raw with the peel on. Obviously, wash them to get rid of the residual effects and the chemicals in there as well. Fire away.
Yeah, so now that we know why high cholesterol is a concern, we'll talk about reducing it with diet. So one of the things that you often need to do to reduce your cholesterol through diet is looking at what you're eating and what contains saturated fats and reducing that consumption. So on this slide, we have a list of foods that are rich in saturated fats. As well as an image of what a saturated fat molecule looks like in the bottom right-hand corner. So things like butter, ghee, lard, coconut oil, palm oil, cake, biscuits, fatty cuts of meat, sausages, bacon, cheese, pastries, cream, ice cream, coconut milk or coconut cream, milkshakes, chocolate and chocolate spreads. These are all foods that can be quite rich in saturated fats. So even though you might not be consuming an excessive amount of these, if you consistently consume them, that can kind of add up in the types of saturated fats that you're consuming.
So it's interesting that people say that, butter and ghee are natural, lard are natural foods. These are natural foods that kill you. And so to me, there's, margarine is better than butter, but margarine's not a health food. So to me, I'm trying to eat Mother Nature's real food. So I'm trying to get rid of all the, instead of eating olive oil, I'm trying to eat more olives, for instance, avocado, I'm trying to eat that. I'm just attentive I'm really trying to say is that Mother Nature developed a whole cocktail of food. We as human beings, when we try to process foods, we get this wrong. At one time, we used to add trans fatty acid to food so they have longer shelf life. But trans fatty acids turns out to be very much causing high LDL and lowering the HDL cholesterol. So the food industry has evolved and got trans fatty acids out, but we still have, saturated fat is a controversial area. But to me, is that butter, ghee, lard, coconut oil, palm oil, these are all not healthy foods. To me, bacon is, anything that has nitrates in it, it's cancer on a stick. I have a sweet tooth. I don't know how to handle all these sorts of things. At one time, Wendy's in the summertime has their shakes for 99 cents special. When I found out, I think it's about 350 calories of what's in it, I just stopped buying them. I always like to get a deal. And if you have chocolate milk, well, just get chocolate milk with skim milk or 1% as a treat. And so these are some of the foods that if you're gonna have cheese, you can actually buy low-fat cheese if you want, or skim milk cheese and things of that nature. Or you can actually replace that with what am I thinking of? How do you make cheesy things with yeast? What's that called again, Aditi?
Like the plant-based versions of cheese, is that what you're referring to? Yeah, so a lot of those are usually like cashew or nut derived, and then there's a lot of nutritional yeast in them. If you're looking for the cheesy flavor, you can just use nutritional yeast on its own. Nutritional
yeast is actually really quite tasty. You can make a nice macaroni recipe with nutritional yeast, and you can put little cashews if you want to. They're a little rich in calories, but those are, a better way of making, macaroni and cheese, for instance. When, standard pizza that you get, pepperoni is just not it's carcinogenic. So what we might want to do is just half the cheese and just put all the vegetables you can think of and try to get a whole wheat crust if you can. So these are some of the things you can think about. Cured meat, salami, bacon are foods that they're tasty, but they're killing you from heart disease and from cancer. And you still have to live, but you can think about how to live better and healthier. Any questions or thoughts from anybody?
I have a question about like coconut milk. Like coconut oil is not good, but how about the coconut milk? I do cook Asian, like Thai food quite a bit, and some recipes are calling for milk, coconut milk. So is this bad? I'm using the light milk anyway, but
yeah. So coconut milk is bad. you know, you can, so to me is that I'm trying to eat more like almond milk, oatmeal milk. I'm using a little bit of skim milk. So dairy, are we going to talk about dairy at all today, Dee Dee?
Yeah, so we do have a slide on dairy. In terms of coconut milk, yes, it is a source of saturated fats. If you still want to use it, recommendation would just be to reduce the amount and probably go for like the light coconut
Yeah,
milk, which
I
is a little
always
bit
do.
less.
Yeah, thank you.
Great question. Any other questions from anybody?
Okay, if not, I'll move on to cholesterol content. So usually when you think about food having different fat content, it also has cholesterol content. So this is the chart here that just kind of lists what the cholesterol content is per various foods. And again, this is based on like kind of what the standard is assumed to be. However, if you would look at the nutrition label, you can also see what's indicated on there. So for instance, milk, non-fat, about 4 milligrams. Milk low fat is 10 milligrams, whole milk is 33, then yogurt non-fat is 10, yogurt whole is 29, cheddar cheese is 30, cottage cheese is 10. And then for fats, so for butter, you're looking at 11 milligrams. For margarine and vegetable oils, it's 0. For meats and proteins, tofu is 0, beans is 0, eggs is 212, but that's all in the yolk, and we'll talk about that in an upcoming slide. For different types of fish, it can range from 41 to 71. And then for red meats, if you're looking at beef, it could be 78, 94, 89. And then for lamb, it's 106, ham is 53. And finally, for things like pork and chicken, it can be 79 to 85. So there is a cholesterol content in a lot of different foods. But if you notice, the more plant-based foods tend to have 0 or a much lower amount of cholesterol. So in terms of how much cholesterol should you be eating?
Back one slide, just to say, so to me, the best source of protein right now is beans. And then after, I think the next hierarchy, I think, would be fish, then things like chicken, lean meat. Fattier meat and things of that nature is that, you know, from lambs to ribs and things of that nature is that they're just not good for you. And there's a whole debate. There was actually a recent study in COVID time that looked at diet. So there's a Dr. Dean Orange who's very plant focused, and he showed some data that people that eat meat are 400 more likely to have severe complications from COVID, being hospitalized or getting sick, compared to people that are plant-based eaters or people who eat fish. So to me is that you can decide if you want to be. I'm moving to more plants, and for one thing is I just don't want to kill things in the environment. Again, for every pound of cattle, I think it takes about seven pounds of protein. For fish and chicken, it's 3 pounds. So for the environment, you're always better off eating as much as you can for plants and grains. And but you have to decide for your taste and the environment what you want to do too as well. So if you're going to eat chicken and fish, make sure you have no skin on the chicken or the turkey, and you use lean cuts. And for dairy, for instance, skim milk has basically no fat. Regular milk has 2 teaspoons of fat per serving. So things like butter or margarine, regular milk, 2% milk are things that have a fair fat content. I think dairy is still a controversial area. Some people feel that the plant-based milks that are enriched with calcium are a better choice. And I'll refer you to go back to our micronutrient or video that we just did last Friday about that as well, other videos as well. So somebody's think of that. So diet's not all or none. There's different areas, but for a cholesterol perspective, I think saturated fat and cholesterol content of food's important. Any questions or thoughts from anybody?
We do have a question in the chat. How about the fat in fish, the brown parts?
Yeah, I think we're going to show a slide about that in a couple seconds. Is that right? About the polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fat. Is that right? Hold that thought for 2
Yes.
seconds. Yeah, we'll come back. It's a great question.
Okay. So in terms of how much cholesterol should you be eating, if you are concerned about your blood cholesterol, so you do have elevated cholesterol, it is recommended that you limit your cholesterol intake to about 200 to 300 milligrams per day. Ideally, you want it to be under 300 milligrams per day. So what's important to note is that previously we thought that you should just eliminate all sources of cholesterol in the diet because it's directly implicated in high cholesterol. However, more recent research is actually showing that the cholesterol that you're observing in like the blood levels, the major contributor to that is actually saturated in trans fat because your liver will basically process that into the cholesterol. So as a result, in addition to kind of limiting the cholesterol, the main thing you want to focus on is trans fats, just getting rid of them completely. But in Canada, they don't really put that in processed food anymore since we know that it has multiple negative effects. And then for saturated fats, you want to limit that, but you also want to replace it with unsaturated fats, which is what we'll be talking about in a couple of slides. So the big question in terms of cholesterol always tends to come back to eggs, wanting to know whether eggs are a good food to consume or not. They are a good source of protein. However, a boiled egg does have 186 to kind of 212 milligrams of cholesterol, depending on the type of egg or the resource you're consulting. So if you want to reduce dietary cholesterol and you don't want this 186 milligrams of cholesterol, simply just eat the egg white because the cholesterol is concentrated in the egg yolk. However, it's important to note that for most people, consuming one egg a day does not really increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. What most people will point out is that it matters what you pair the egg with. So if you're eating your eggs with a size of butter or cheese and on white bread, that's not really a great meal to be consuming. However, if you're using your egg and trying to pair it with another nutrient-dense meal, so for instance, one of the most popular breakfasts, because it's so well-rounded, is whole wheat toast with avocado and an egg. This is definitely a good option to have because you're using the egg to add protein to a meal that's already rich with some monounsaturated fats and some whole grains.
Yeah,
Does
so
anyone?
eggs still are a controversial area. The meta-analysis on eggs shows the more eggs you eat, the higher your total mortality. Eating somewhere between 3 to 7 eggs a week for most people may not be an issue. Some of us hyperabsorb cholesterol, some of us don't. So if you want to in yourself, you can try your diet with and without eggs. I try to keep myself to about 3 eggs a week or less, and I eat a lot more egg white as necessary. But some people feel that a lot of the vegetarians in the world feel that that's something that they're worried about. One is how we treat farm animals. I live on a farm and we have 12 chickens, so they have free range. We treat them nice. We're not going to eat our chickens, so I feel that's okay. I'm not being mean. They're not in cages. They're just running around, and so. But you have to think about all these factors in your own mind. So I think for most people, if you want, having 3 or 4 eggs a week is not unreasonable. If you feel differently, that's fine. Same thing. Some people feel that any degree of dairy is bad because dairy is that we're the only we're eating cow's milk and we're using some other animal milk. In milk, there are potential carcinogens or substances that promote insulin and growth, and some people feel it may be carcinogenic or not. I think that's one of those controversial areas. So if you're going to drink dairy, make sure it's a low-fat dairy. And so what I do is that I'm drinking a lot more oat milk, soy milk, and different forms of plant-based milks, making sure that they have adequate calcium because it's still a good course of calcium. I'm drinking less amounts of dairy milk over time. I haven't totally eliminated. In fact, I don't think I'm going to have, if someone offers me a meat-based meal, I'm not going to say no, but I'm not going to go out there and buy meat at this point in time. But I'm still eating fish, and everybody's a little bit different. We'll come back to that, like that, just to that area of stuff. Any thoughts from anybody else at all? Everybody's quiet. Either they're totally convinced, or they're just going to nod their heads or anything I said.
I
Okay,
just agree with you.
fair enough. And you're going to see different opinions. And basically, the diet literature is hard to interpret, and it's a controversial area still. So at one time that saturated fat and cholesterol were bad things. Now we think saturated fat's a little bit worse. I think cholesterol content of food is still important. So I'm trying to move to more, Mother Nature's real cocktail of food. So put those grains in there, have a few nuts and seeds, and milk is a processed food. So I'm trying to lean a little bit away from that, but having a glass or two of skim milk, because that's your major source of calcium and protein, or you don't go to jail for that, in my mind.
I have a question about canned tuna. I mean, fish is good for you because of omega-3s and all the healthy fats, but how about tuna in a can?
Sure. Are we going to show this? We have hold that question for just 2 seconds. We're going to get to fish in 2 seconds. I'm going to show you a slide. And I'll be sure to answer that, and Dee as well.
Yeah, we do have another question about fish in the chat. We do have some slides upcoming, so we'll answer all of the fish questions then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now onto dairy. This is again another highly contested kind of idea. So dairy is a source of saturated fat. However, a 2018 review did find that dairy tends to have a neutral effect on cardiovascular disease. In fact, fermented dairy products like yogurt and kefir either have a neutral effect, or some studies actually found that they had a positive effect. So dairy remains pretty controversial. If you're consuming it in moderation and making sure you're consuming it from certain sources, for example, you're having a low-fat milk or you're having some yogurt, it's not inherently harmful. It's again one of those things that remains controversial because it's a little bit hard to study. Nutrition in general is just hard to study because of the ethics and the way you're able to set up a trial. Most of the data tends to be observational. So with keeping that in mind, if you're concerned about the fat content from dairy, try to limit or avoid the consumption of cheese. Just try to reduce that. And then in terms of milk and yogurt, opt for lower fat ones.
So most cheeses are basically 30 to 40% fat. You can get skim milk cheeses at 10 to 15% if you like. Interesting about fermented food and things of that nature. They've been around for a long time. So one of the drinks I'm drinking right now is kombucha. Kombucha is fermented tea. This has, I think, 5 calories. Sauerkraut is a prime example of fermented foods that you can eat. Yogurts we talked about. So these are things that you can think about adding more to your diet if you'd like. I'm trying to get away from my number one beverage is still water, but I want some flavor. So kombucha has a nice fizzy taste for that. I do enjoy diet pop, but I'm trying to get rid of diet pop. So kombucha is a good example of some fizziness. It's fermented tea. Cheers, 5 calories.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite satisfying. So you can either make it yourself or you can actually buy it. And we've done both. Does anybody else drink kombucha at all?
I do on occasion, but not unless someone else has bought it. Like I don't go out and buy it because I'm not the biggest fan, but if someone offers it to me, I will drink it.
It's not as sweet as as pop and things of that nature as well, but it has the fermented products in there, which has potential for helping the microflora. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we mentioned about the microflora, there's a lot, our richest source of bacteria is in our gut and our GI system, and there's good things and bad things in there, and we can make it better with lots of fruits and vegetables, high fiber food. And one of the things that, for instance, eggs, meat, even some of the fish is that they actually go to the gut, change the flora in the gut. There's some data, for instance, that dairy products can actually increase breast cancer and prostate cancer and activate certain genes. Again, it's one of those areas of controversy, like everything else in life. You can see about the vaccine, some people are very strongly in your direction. My feeling is that dairy is not a terribly unhealthy food. It's a reasonable choice. I think the plant-based milks are probably better for many of us. One of the things, if you're using almond milk, it's very rich in water. It takes a lot of water to produce. So that one's actually harder on the environment than some of the other foods as well. So I'm thinking of the environment as well as animals and things of that nature as well. So to me is that, so I've reduced, not totally eliminated that, and my mind's not totally made up. You know, Dr. Ganguly is not joining us today, but he feels very strongly that any degree of dairy will activate certain genes and make you more likely to have prostate or breast cancer. I'm not so sure. Other experts, Dr. Youssef, and from other trials, feels totally opposite about that. Dairy is a very good food for you. So that's a divide in the medical literature, and eggs and dairy are in that area there. So so for eggs, I limit to 3 or 4 a week, and I eat more egg whites. And for dairy, I eat less of it, just skim milk. And I'm trying to eat as much as I can non-processed foods. Remember that 60 to 70% of many North Americans' calories come from processed food. So if we can get rid of processed food to any degree, we do better. Any thoughts about that from anybody, or Didi? Do you want to put any conclusions to that as well?
No, I kind of agree with what you said. Nutrition literature is in general quite hard because most of the data is kind of observational. You don't have as many opportunities to do like a randomized trial like you would with other forms. So personally, to me, I think that as long as you're not consuming a significant amount of dairy, like you're not drinking like a gallon of milk every day, it's probably not going to make a difference if you have a little bit here and there. So I myself continue to consume dairy, but again, there's kind of a spectrum of opinions where some people believe that it's better to avoid. If you feel like it's better to avoid dairy, absolutely you can. There are other options. Just in terms of calcium intake, make sure you choose some non-dairy sources that are fortified with calcium.
And go look at that the webinar. What do you call multivitamins, and what are we talking about? Vitamins and multi. What's the actual title of that one?
I think it's called Vitamins and Minerals. We have an image of it on one of the slides.
We'll come back to that a little bit later. So I'm being more attentive to micronutrients at this point in time. And that's real food.
And we do have a comment in the chat, all in moderation, right? Yep, pretty much. So
I think that's true, but we lost moderation. Right now, is a person born today has a 50% chance of dying diabetes. 3/4 of North American adults are overweight. So we lost moderation. And so I don't disagree with that, but most people's moderation doesn't fit to a healthy lifestyle. Yes, moderation is good, but we lost it so far. We have to really get back to real moderation.
Yeah, the definition of moderation, if you want to know what like moderate consumption of any food is, try to go look at like some really good resources for nutrition, whether you're looking at, there's some articles on like the NHS or HealthLink BC or Harvard Health. They usually kind of do a good job of explaining what moderate consumption is considered. And you would kind of want to go by that, because when they say moderate consumption, they're referring to like the moderation aspect. If you're kind of taking it in terms of your personal diet and what you consider to be moderate, that's a little bit of a different story because that varies for everyone. So if you're wondering what moderate consumption is, definitely check out some of those resources. They have a lot of articles that kind of cater to that kind of content. Okay, so moving on from our discussion on eggs, dairy, saturated fat, and cholesterol, we're now going to start talking about things that will help reduce your cholesterol levels. So one of those things is plant sterols. So according to the Heart and Stroke Foundation, about 2 grams of plant sterols a day can help lower your LDL cholesterol. And essentially plants sterol is kind of in line with what fiber will do. Through a variety of different processes, it reduces the serum LDL cholesterol, which overall is going to reduce the plaque formation. And common sources of plant sterols are things like grains, vegetable oils, whole grains, nuts, vegetables, and fruits. So basically, more plant-based sources are going to give you the plant sterols. So starting off with grains, which was mentioned as a source of sterols, they're also a really great source of fiber, which can help reduce the LDL cholesterol. Whole grains are known to reduce inflammation, cholesterol, the risk for developing various types of cancers, and diabetes as well. You can know if something is whole grain by looking for the stamp. So we have an image of the stamp at the bottom. So if you're looking at a processed product and you would like to look for a whole grain product, you can kind of look for the stamp and that'll clarify that. There is a hierarchy of whole grains. We do explain this in a video on our YouTube channel that's specifically dedicated to whole grains. But just to briefly go over it, at the top, you have intact whole grains, things like wheat berries, barley, oat groats, quinoa. Then you go to broken whole grains, so steel cut oats, cracked wheat, rolled whole grains, so rolled oats, barley, and rye. Then shredded whole grains like shredded wheat, whole wheat flour and its products, then cold flake cereals. And then at the bottom, you have puffed wheat, rice, and millet. So in terms of what grains you're choosing to consume, you don't necessarily always have to be consuming from the top of the hierarchy. Just try and mix it up, as you'll get a different variety of fiber and nutrients from the different grains you try. And with that being said, if you're trying to conceive of a more optimized meal, perhaps you always eat it with rice, maybe this time try eating it with barley or try eating it with quinoa. So try to switch things up within the hierarchy to kind of get the best bang for your buck in terms of nutrients. So what are some sources of whole grains? So popcorn is a really great source of whole grains. It's also a very nice healthy snack, rich in fiber, especially if you're getting the version that doesn't really have any added butter or salt. Quinoa, millet, cereal, oats, these are all really great sources of whole grains. And then we have an image on the right with some other varieties like spelts, sorghum, rye, corn, millet, etc. So a 2016 meta-analysis by Zong et al. Found that people who had 70 grams a day of whole grains had a 23% lower risk of cardiovascular disease and mortality compared to those who didn't consume that amount. Another meta-analysis showed that cardiovascular disease was 21% less likely in people who ate 2.5 or more servings of whole grains a day. And the comparison group was a group that tended to eat less than 2 servings during the week. With the Western type diet, we definitely tend to underconsume the whole grains, as it tends to lean more heavily on processed foods. So it's important to make sure you're getting an adequate consumption of whole grains. And as I mentioned, they're a great source of dietary fiber. Fiber can decrease the uptake of cholesterol and the cholesterol synthesis, which can overall lower the LDL cholesterol. So we do have a video on our YouTube channel about whole grains. It's one of our shorter videos. It's only 22 minutes long. So if you are looking to learn more about that, please go check it out. We go over more information about whole grains, and there's a sample recipe there as well. So now to briefly discuss dietary fat intake. So fat is a macronutrient. So we have carbohydrates.
Back to that one thing. This is actually healthy cooking for less. People say that healthy food costs more to eat. Well, if you get your own beans and you have lots of grains, it's actually less costly to eat. The hard part is, of course, is that during the winter months, getting fresh fruits and vegetables, you have to replace that with frozen, what's available, using coupons. So you can actually live quite well with oatmeal, with any beans that you prepare. It's a third of the price to actually make your own beans, soak your own beans, and actually buy them canned, less sodium. Right now, the price of meat and fish has skyrocketed, and you get a better bang for your buck for eating more beans and things of that nature as well. And a lot of frozen vegetables and things of that nature you can get to as well. So take a look at that video. I think you'll find that very, very helpful.
Yeah, so definitely that video is a great resource if you want to check out more about whole grains. So now to briefly talk about dietary fat intake. So fat is a micronutrient, is a macronutrient with 3 macronutrients: protein, carbohydrates, and fat. So for fat, the daily consumption is about 25 to 30% of your daily caloric intake. Now, less than 10% of that should be from saturated fat. Ideally, you want it to be less than 7%. So most of your dietary fats should come from mono or polyunsaturated fats. And it's not enough to just cut out the saturated fats out of your diet. Most research will show that the best benefits is when you cut out the saturated fat and replace it with unsaturated fats. So we can see this image on the right. A high saturated fat diet leads to fewer and weaker receptors. These are the LDL receptors that will consume the LDL. So you get higher levels of LDL in the blood, whereas a low saturated fat and high polyunsaturated fat diet means that you have stronger LDL receptors for LDL clearance, and therefore you have lower LDL cholesterol. So now we're just going to take a look at some different sources of fat and compare the breakup of saturated fatty acids, monounsaturated fatty acids, and polyunsaturated fatty acids across these different foods. So if we were to look at something like butter, we can see that 68% of it is saturated fat, 28% is monounsaturated fatty acids, 4% is polyunsaturated fat. If we take a look at an animal protein, so for example, we're taking a look at beef, we see 50% is saturated fat, 42% unsaturated, that's monounsaturated, and then 5% polyunsaturated. However, we look at something like salmon, you're looking at 17% saturated, and the rest is mono and polyunsaturated fats. Similarly, if we look at avocados, we can see that it has a lot of monounsaturated fats, a little bit of polyunsaturated fats, and very little saturated fats. So this graph kind of just breaks down the saturated fat content of various products in relation to the monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. And we can see that for fish and for plant products, it tends to lean more towards monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats as the main constituents of the fat intake, and tends to have less saturated fats.
So if you look at this in careful, the questions about, should I eat fish or not? You can see that, did you know that, for instance, because farmed salmon, for instance, has more saturated fat than wild salmon, because what happens is that we actually feed our salmon in the farm unhealthy food. And so they actually have more saturated fat. With the animal we feed, we end up eating that over time. And so anything in blue is saturated fat, and we think you should limit that in part. So you can see, look at butter and whole milk, ground beef. Eggs are relatively high in fat content, but I forget how much of that would be in the egg white or egg yolk, but you can see you can make things healthier. So to me, omega-3 fatty acids have some potential benefit. So to me, I'm trying to eat more fish, and so the supplements of DHA and APA buy over the counter are totally useless. If you want a form that's cardiovascular protected, you have to get pure EPA, which is by prescription drug only. So I'm trying to get more flax in different areas, and I'm going to actually take some flax, I'm going to grind it up, grind up the flax to release the alpha-linolic acid, the omega-3 component of that. So does that answer the question about fish there? So you can see that fish there is, it can be rich in fat. And I only eat the fatty fish, to be honest with you. So salmon, sardines, and mackerel have the omega-3 content of them. And that's what I try to eat. And the contaminants are closest to the skin. So I used to eat the skin in the past. I don't eat the skin anymore, or try not to. It's kind of a tastier part to me, but so I'm getting away from that. And of course, is that baking and broiling are the best way to eating these foods, not frying. So that word called frying of foods is something that is not healthy.
Yeah, so speaking of polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, these are the fats that you want to be consuming as majority of your dietary fat intake. So for polyunsaturated fat sources are the best source is actually fatty fish, so things like salmon and mackerel. To a lesser extent, you have certain nuts like walnuts, flax seeds and flaxseed oil, soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, hemp seed, chia seed. And then for monounsaturated fats, things like olives and olive oil, canola oil, nuts and nut butters, different types of seeds, avocados, and olives. So all of these are really great to be consuming as the fat sources within your diet. Oh, Dr. Curnew, we do have another fish question in the chat. What about codfish? Is it good or bad? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, cod it basically has a lower fat content to fish. It's a delicious fish. It doesn't have the omega-3 properties of it. So, you know, to me, it's like chicken. It's a reasonable choice. It doesn't have anything special. So I'm trying to eat the fatty fish more for my omega-3 consumption. I don't get that much in codfish, but if you like cod and you're broiling it or baking it, it's not necessarily a terrible choice. You know, grains and you know, beans are even a better choice. Again, the number one protein that you should be aiming for is through beans, so cod would be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, so now that we've had a discussion on fats, I just wanted to remind everyone to just be mindful of the caloric content. So a lot of these mono and polyunsaturated fat sources are really great for the nutrients that they provide, but fat also has 9 calories per gram compared to carbohydrates and proteins that have 4 calories per gram. So therefore, they are quite calorically dense. So it's just important to be mindful of the portion sizes you are consuming. And over here, I have some common fat sources, the serving size, and the calories. So for instance, if we look at walnuts, if we were to take 14 halves, that's 185 calories and 18 grams of fat per serving. If you're looking at like olive oil, 119 calories per 1 tablespoon, 21% of the daily value. Avocados of 160 calories if you're taking just the half. And then looking at some fish sources, so if we look at mackerel, 1 piece has 244 calories and 20 grams of fat. So just be mindful of these serving sizes and the calories that come with it.
So I just took some flaxseed, and if you go back one slide, so I took the flaxseed, I grind. If you just eat the flax, you don't release the omega-3 or alpha-linoleic acid. So you can see that 2 tablespoons is about 90 calories. So I'm going to try to get some beneficial effects there. So I'm going to sprinkle that into both my soup and into the dip.
Yeah, flax seeds are definitely not just a great source of omega-3s. They have a lot of other nutrient properties as well. They are a bit of a more expensive health food, but I think the best place to get them is Costco, because you're able to get ground flaxseed in like a giant bunch. And usually if you keep it in the freezer, it lasts you a really long time as well. And just try to kind of put that in almost anything that you eat to get the benefits. So in addition to kind of your fat intake and thinking about grains, you also have to think about your vegetable and fruit consumption. So the Canada Food Guide does recommend that half of the plate be vegetables and fruits. They are not only a great source of fiber, but also a really great source of plant sterols and a lot of different micronutrients, a lot of different vitamins and minerals. In terms of specific fruits and vegetables that lend itself towards cholesterol lowering properties, things like eggplant and okra, which are considered to be very low in calories, but also really rich in soluble fiber. And then again, in terms of fruits, things like apple, grapes, strawberries, and citrus fruit are really rich in pectin, which is a type of soluble fiber that's known to help reduce LDL cholesterol. So eating in general, any form of fruit and vegetable is probably going to be a great addition to your diet. However, these types here with the eggplant, the okra, and the apples, grapes, strawberries, and citrus fruits are probably going to be great additions to your diet if you're looking to reduce cholesterol specifically. And finally, we come to beans and lentils. So we've talked a lot about how beans and lentils are a really beneficial source. So a 2014 systematic review and meta-analysis, so this is a high quality of evidence that looks at a lot of different studies and does some statistical analysis and synthesizing of information. It found that a diet rich in dietary pulses, so beans and lentils, and this amount was usually averaging around 130 grams per day, helped lower LDL cholesterol levels by 0.17 millimoles per liter on average in most people who are consuming this level of pulses. So introducing beans and lentils into your diet not only introduces a lot of fiber and a lot of protein as well, it does also reduce your cholesterol. Okay, and then I think we have a question in the chat. How quickly do you see the results? I think that's referring to the beans. For the beans and lentils, I think their observation period was a year, if I'm not mistaken. So it is like a longer time frame. You're not going to see results immediately, but if you follow that protocol, probably within a year or so, you'll see some reduction in your overall LDL cholesterol.
I think actually it'll be much quicker. I think you'll see within a couple months actually. So to me, is that what you'll get is a lowering of LDL cholesterol, but you're also getting the antioxidants, the anti-inflammatories, Mother Nature's cocktail of healthy food that we can't reproduce. One food I think has been undervalued is soy. At one time, soy was said to have estrogen-like properties. The Japanese eat a lot of soy products. They don't have much breast cancer. Soy actually is very rich. It's one of the biggest sources of protein from beans. It actually has calcium, so it has a higher amount of calories compared to some other beans. Has a good protein content, a higher fat content, but it really has LDL lowering properties. It actually has a lot of protein in it, and it has a fair bit of calcium. So to me, this is one of the superfoods that I encourage you to get. And any beans are good. There's no bad beans. And one of the things is that what I just did here is that I always like mushy peas. It's sort of like a very British type of food. So I bought some mushy peas, and what I did is that I just put half the amount of that salt tablet in it. It's delicious. So it's a nice treat for me, and it's a healthier treat.
For sure. And yes, speaking of soy, so soybeans, they're a bean that I believe has the most amount of protein compared to other beans. So they're a really great source for that. Soybeans and soy products, so things like tofu and soy milk, have been shown to reduce cholesterol. So essentially, they have this component called isoflavones, and that tends to inhibit both cholesterol synthesis and absorption, which overall just decreases the level of cholesterol in your liver, and the level of cholesterol that your liver is producing also decreases your plasma total cholesterol.
Well, remember we mentioned butter probably is the worst food for your health in the sense of calories, saturated fat, cholesterol. You can get healthier by margarine. You get healthier by chicken and lean meat. And then I put next would be cod, for instance. Cod is somewhere in between. Then you get to, and I put eggs in that area. Put dairy. Then I start to go to fish, fatty fish. And if I had to pick a superfood, I take beans, and probably of all the beans, I probably put soy as one of the healthiest foods that on the planet for you. So any beans are superfoods. Soy just happens to have, I think it's pretty rich in calcium as well. So to me, it's it does a lot of good things into that. So put any beans that you want. You can put, some people like white beans because it's less. It doesn't have the same flavor. It takes the flavor of other foods as well, and it's a healthier food. I'm leaning more now towards peas as well because they have lesser calories and a good protein content as well. So chickpeas or kidney beans, I don't like the taste as much. I like them blended with other things, but I love black beans, for instance. And I know we're going to talk about black bean or brown or brownie with black bean. That's a better form right there. So does that make sense to everybody? And so what I tend to do, and also too, is that you will actually feel fuller and eat less because it's a high fiber food, and you'll have less blood sugar rise compared to other foods, and you'll actually lose some weight if you use beans compared to other foods. Again, avoid all liquid calories if you want to lose weight. Orange juice is, it's about 100 to 200 calories per glass, and you don't feel full. And orange is about 100 calories, and you feel fuller, and you get the fiber and all the foods that you're supposed to.
Yeah, so there are two questions in the chat. One is edamame made from soybeans? So edamame is soybeans. It's just the green soybean. So there's also the white soybean. So edamame is the green soybean version. In terms of like processing, you have edamame, and then from edamame you get tofu. So if you like edamame, it's kind of higher up on the hierarchy than tofu. And the second question is, does almond milk lower LDL? So in terms of almond milk lowering LDL, it is a good source of unsaturated fats. So it does have that benefit in terms of contributing to lowering LDL cholesterol overall. In terms of direct correlation between almond milk and LDL, it probably doesn't have enough to have a direct impact. But if you're including that in your diet alongside other sources of unsaturated fat, it could definitely lower overall LDL. And the next one is recipe for black bean brownies. We actually have one on one of the slides, and then I can send out a PDF document with the directions for that as well. So we can send you that recipe.
So there was a trial done in Spain that looked at replacing an older people who had heart disease. They replaced it by giving extra virgin olive oil versus a standard heart and stroke low fat diet versus giving walnuts, almonds, and walnuts. And it showed that the olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, remember for olive oil, olives I think the best choice. And next would be extra first press olive oil, because what happens with olive oil is that the antioxidant content are basically found in the first press. So there's less processing. So, and unfortunately, what people say you get and what you buy are two different things. So to me, I'm trying to limit my amount of oils in general. So I'd rather eat the olives in my mind. But if you want to get extra virgin olive oil, you can, small amounts, because it's rich in calories. And I'm trying to eat a few little nuts, and almonds are one of those healthier nuts. It does have a little bit of lowering LDL cholesterol, but also has some extra properties that are cardiovascular protective, independent of its LDL lowering effect. So it's a good food, but just watch how many you eat, and get the unsalted ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to just briefly wrap up our discussion on soy, so 25 grams of soy protein, so that could be 10 ounces of tofu or 2.5 cups of soy milk can lower LDL cholesterol by about 5 to 6%. And Dr. Curnew, we do have another question in the chat. What about grapeseed oil? Is that any good? I'm personally not sure about grapeseed oil. Do you have any thoughts on that?
The word oil, so to me it's a processed food. I'm trying to encourage you to eat now there's the different melting points of oil for different things. As you cook oil, they convert to substances that are potentially carcinogenic. I'm really encouraging you is that eat the foods, the real food, and avoid processing. Oils are processed food. They're liquid calories. They're just not a great choice. So I'm trying to be cooking as much as I can oil-free. For instance, in my salad is that I use balsamic vinegar at this stage. I don't actually like any of the dressings out there. I do like the dressings, but I'm trying to avoid them and the oils, any of them. So I just don't consider oil by itself. The only oil that makes the most sense to me is extra virgin olive oil, small amounts. But I'm trying to get all my fats through real food. And I'm just taking the our dishes today, and I don't know about you guys here. Look at this, beautiful, smells good. Take a carrot. There's my dip. Now it's not the same as chicken wings, but I'll live longer, and I'll be skinnier. And my soup turned out to be a little bit of a stew. Probably not much liquid, so what I'll do is I'll put some extra broth in it when I have it there, or I'll have it as a stew. And what I did is I had some chickpeas, and I love lentils. I put extra lentils in it, and that was quite nice. And I just grounded some flax and threw that on there, and add some parsley to that, and I might actually add a little bit of kale to that for some extra calcium as well as antioxidants and more fruits and minerals. Ivanka, how'd you like your dish today?
I didn't try it yet. It's actually for dinner.
Oh, good, yeah. So I'm cooking. I'm eating as I'm going. I always try as I cook, right? And anybody else did any cooking at all today, or everybody just sort of watching right now?
No, we just watching.
Good, yeah. Hope you go, and we'll post this up at some point in time too as well, so you can look at that there. What else there, Aditi? Tell us what's next.
Yeah, so we're just going to end up with some other fun recipes that you can try. So starting off, we talked a little bit about whole grains and how oats are a really great source of fiber. They're on the hierarchy of whole grains, and therefore they can be beneficial for reducing cholesterol. So if you're looking for kind of like a healthy dessert type snack, oat bars are really easy to make. It's just maple syrup, oats, and then whatever you would like to mix in. So that can be nuts, seeds, dried fruit, fresh fruit, chocolate chips. And to change the flavor, what I typically do is I'll either use pumpkin puree or applesauce or a mashed banana and just kind of switch those out in what I'm mixing in. And that just gives a different variety. Very simple. It takes maybe like 10 minutes to mix everything together and maybe 20 minutes to bake. So they're a great, nice, like healthier dessert alternative and snack that you can incorporate into your diet that will have some benefits with the nuts, the seeds, and the oats to kind of help lower that cholesterol.
If you go back to that recipe, I really love that recipe. So what I start to do is I actually put pumpkin seeds into things right now, and instead of any oils, I just use pureed. Just had the bananas that were going brown. I just put them in the freezer, and then I took them out to make that. It was so delicious, and oats are dirt cheap. And I love chocolate chips, so I have these dark chocolate chips as a little bit of a treat there, a little bit of flavor there, and fantastic. It was delicious. And what I also did is I had we had a couple of apples that were starting to go a little bit soft, so I just threw that into the mixture too as well, a little bit extra sweetness to that, and I put half the amount of maple syrup, or just a fraction of the maple syrup was on the recipe there. Delicious.
You don't really need maple syrup if you have really ripe mashed banana.
Yeah.
It'll be less sugar.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. If the bananas are really ripe, you could honestly omit the maple syrup or maybe use like a tablespoon or so. For the pumpkin and the applesauce, especially if you're getting unsweetened, it's not as inherently sweet, so you might want to add a little bit more if you want it to be sweeter. If you really enjoy the taste of it without the maple syrup, then by all means just omit it.
And cinnamon is just a wonderful food. It just adds flavor. Same thing when you're cooking. Adding garlic makes things better. Adding cinnamon makes things adds to that sweetness of whatever. Perfect.
And then we talked a lot about beans. A really great way to add a lot of different types of beans or lentils into a dish is to kind of do a soup, or you could do a vegan chili. So this recipe we've already done in one of the videos on the YouTube channel. It's an intermittent fasting video. So the name of the video is Cooking and Diet Club Intermittent Fasting. And then the recipe actually starts at 15 minutes and 25 seconds. So if you're interested in checking that out, you can just jump to that timestamp. You could also alternatively watch the video and learn about intermittent fasting if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, something you can blend, and you can blend, you can do different things. And so in the I'm going to encourage everybody to look at a book called 30 Days to Healthier You. So we start off this is a book that I'm really proud of. If you want to consider getting that book, when we start off with an optional couple-day fast. So what you can do is that we talked about a tri-tea fast, for instance, if you want to try that, or in the diet club, sometimes we just fast 1 day a week. Some people fast 2 days a week. Some people fast for 16 hours at a time. So you can just mix and match. There's nothing magic about doing one different thing. You have to try different things and rotate different things. So when I'm trying to lose weight, I'm a nighttime eater, but if I fast for 24 hours, it resets things in my mind. So so you can think about that. And there's some people that fast twice a week, for instance. Some people eat for just 16 hours a day. You're always better off eating your calories in the morning, but no matter what I do, I'm always hungry at nighttime. So I haven't solved that one yet, but I'll keep working on that. And this is
Yeah,
a great chili dish.
Yeah, and then since it's kind of Super Bowl Sunday, this is the recipe we actually did last month, the cauliflower wings. And you'll get a copy of the PowerPoint after the presentation, which does have the video for that. But it's basically, instead of dipping your chicken wings into the batter and frying them, you dip the cauliflower and you bake it.
It's delicious. It's really tasty. Again, I won't say it's the same thing as chicken wings, but it's wonderful. And this is wonderful too as well.
Yeah, so then there's black bean brownies. So this is a recipe that I have for them, and I can send out the instructions after. So essentially it's 1.5 cups of black beans. When I make it, I kind of blend / pulse until it's kind of a mushy consistency with the milk. So the 1/4 of a cup of plant milk. And then instead of oil, you can add the 2 tablespoons of unsweetened applesauce, 2 to 3 tablespoons of that. If you want to add like oil or more nut butter, you can. I find that having a balance between the nut butter and the applesauce gives the best consistency, but you can completely replace with one or the other. There's some maple syrup in there for sweetness, and then a little bit of baking soda, salt, vanilla, and cocoa powder.
So instead of putting in 3 eggs, you can make 3 flax eggs equivalent. So you grind up 3 tablespoons of flax seeds, some water, and voila, you replace the eggs with something a better choice for you. You see, so is that equivalent to 3 eggs then, or 1 egg?
Yeah, so the 3 tablespoons of ground flaxseed with 6 tablespoons of water is equivalent to 3 eggs. You can even, if you don't want to use all flax eggs or all eggs, you could even do a combination of the 2.
Or you can actually put egg whites if you want to, in some mixture and combinations. But when you put the flax eggs, and I don't miss the eggs at all.
Yeah, so the flax eggs are a really good substitute if you wanted to do like a combination of the 2, or if you wanted to replace the eggs with egg whites. Just note that for every 1 egg, you'd need 2 egg whites. So if I'm replacing a whole egg, I'd be using 2 egg whites to replace the whole egg. Yeah, so that's a recipe for black bean brownies, another healthier version of a dessert you can try. I've made them a couple of times. I honestly don't really notice the black bean taste. It kind of gives it like an earthy flavor, but you can't really put your finger on the fact that it tastes much different than a regular brownie. The only thing that's slightly different is the texture. It's a little softer and a little fudgier, but that's not a bad thing to have in a brownie. So definitely something to try out if you really like brownies and are looking for something new.
And don't tell anybody that has black beans in it, because if you don't tell me there's black beans, you won't really notice it. I find it's a little bit drier though. It doesn't have that, quite the same gooiness or whatever, but man, it's a much healthier choice. And it's like the chocolate industry has worked hard to get that melting point in your mouth, and to make things melt in your mouth, you need to have a certain fat content. So it won't have that same exact true melting point, but this will be a much healthier choice. And I would say it's 80% the taste of the brownies that you buy, and you'll live longer.
Yeah, just one thing to note, because it doesn't have any oil or butter in it, they do go bad faster than your standard brownies. So make sure you keep them like refrigerated. For the standard brownie, if you wanted to keep them out, you could, but because they do have like the butter, the oil content in there to keep them fresher for longer. The black bean ones will go bad within like probably a day if you don't refrigerate them, but probably like 4 or 5 days in the refrigerator.
To be honest, they won't last that long. You're going to eat them up anyways. So if you have good willpower, good for you. You can freeze some of them. Part of the thing you might want to do is just freeze some of this stuff and take them out bits and pieces. So we encourage you to always double the recipe. And put some stuff in the freezer. So like, for instance, this bean dish today, can you freeze it at all, or is that not a good thing to freeze?
Like the soup, that is?
Oh, the dip.
The dip? You could freeze it if you wanted to, but you'd probably ruin the consistency and texture. So better off to just kind of make it in small amounts and refrigerate it. Anything that's kind of creamy, you don't necessarily want to freeze it unless, of course, it's supposed to be ice cream. Then it's good to freeze.
And of course, the soup, you can freeze that very easily. That will freeze very, very well.
So that's all we had for recipes, just a couple of tips. So we talk a lot in this particular workshop about how we can optimize our meals and how to kind of optimize what we're eating. So sometimes it's hard for people to grasp the fact that you might need to be cutting certain things out of your meal, or you think that it's a bit of an all or nothing situation. But one of the things we try to strive for is that optimizing meals is often more about what you can add rather than what you should cut out. So think about all of the different nutrients you can add to a standard meal plan to make it better. So if you really like having, say, a portion of rice, maybe you don't necessarily have to give up the rice or take it out completely, but you can add a lot of other fiber and nutrients to it. So try to bulk up your plate with a lot of lentils and beans and some extra vegetables on the side. If you really like chocolate, you don't want to cut that out completely, then maybe try adding some shaved dark chocolate to your oats or to yogurt or something like that. So it's more about thinking of ways that you can add more nutrition to what you're eating rather than cutting things out completely. Of course, for certain individuals, you might have to definitely cut out certain things as a part of your diet. However, for most of us who are just striving to make our meals a little bit better and a little bit more well-balanced, it's important to think about what we can add rather than what would be taking away.
So for instance, I have a sweet tooth. So what I did is I buy this Belgian dark chocolate, which is 70%. It's a little bitter tasting, but I just take little bits and pieces of it and I just add to things, and I mix in with other things as well. So what I like to do right now at nighttime for a snack, I take frozen blueberries. I take all the different chia seeds, hemp seeds, oatmeal, and put some chocolate bits into it, and take some yogurt, usually non-fat yogurt, and one of the things that I'm using more and more of is Greek yogurt has more protein. I make sure that I get the low fat content. I add a little bit of flavors to that there, so I just mix that in there. So I put a couple tablespoons in it, not that much, and so instead of a chocolate cheesecake, this is what I'll have. I'd rather have chocolate cheesecake, but this is a reasonable substitute. Any others? What was everybody else do? Anybody? Let's talk about some of these videos. Go ahead there, Didi.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, so just a couple of videos to check out. The vitamin and minerals one we've talked about a couple times tonight. So that was the webinar from last Friday. Again, it is one of the longer videos, so totally understandable if you can't watch it all at once, but kind of just try to break it up and look at different sections of it. It might be really helpful. And then we talked about reducing cholesterol today, but we also have a video about reducing triglycerides. So Dr. Curnew mentioned like the Mediterranean diet is a really great diet. So if you're interested in going on more of a Mediterranean style diet, you can check out the PESCO Mediterranean diet video that we have up on our channel. And finally, I thought it was important to just highlight the choosing the right diet for you video. If you're looking to make some changes and you want to know more about various types of diets, that's a really great video to check out as well. And then we have countless other videos. These are 4 I thought I would just highlight today.
So one of the things I'd encourage you as time goes on, look at this video on vitamins and minerals. It talks about micronutrients. So how much iron, how much potassium. For those who have a high triglyceride level, look at that value there. One of the things that alcohol brings is up. This year, there's so many great diets out there. If you really want to lose weight, having more plants and more beans and more grains will help you lose weight. The #1 rated diet by many people is called the Mediterranean diet, and I think having small amounts of fish in there is quite good. And this other one about choosing the right diet. This goes through a whole bunch of different ones. And if you want to lose blood pressure, it's called the DASH diet, dietary approaching to stopping hypertension. So I want you to experiment these different diets. And I'm going to encourage you all to, take the book 30 Days to Health for You and try each of these different diets 30 days at a time and see how that fits in, and then just adapt to that. I just want to thank you all for attending. Any final questions or thoughts from anybody?
think we did have a question in the chat about how long to bake the brownies. I'll just have to flip over to the recipe sheet after I stop sharing my screen, but I can give you that answer in a few minutes. Yeah, so that's all that we have for today. Thank you so much for coming and joining. And I will get the answer for you about the black bean brownies in a second. But does anyone have any questions?
I think that was spectacular. I made a few meals. I tried a few different things, and my wife says, "Get out of the kitchen now. It's her turn in a few minutes." So I'll probably have to leave right now. I want to thank you all for attending. We will try to post this right now. And special thanks to Aditi is that she's taught me so much about cooking and eating better. And we thank you all, Aditi. That's just spectacular. And thank you all for joining. I love everybody's comments and ideas. Are there any topics people want to hear about in the future?
We do have one suggestion in the chat for discussing topics beyond seafood and fish. And for those who are asking about the recipes and the links, yes, I will make a note to send those out.
Absolutely. Well, listen, it's I want to thank everybody. I think we can just stop the recording at this point in time, and thank you all for attending. And we look forward to next time.